The main focus was Rashonna Landfair saying that was her on tape with R. Kelly. And at the time, she was underage. Ain't no way R. Kelly gonna get off that. Milton Brown gonna get off light with a little to no time at all. They barely focused on him. Darrell McDavid gonna get hit with a little time. He was the main focus other than R. Kelly. He was really R. Kelly charge partner. And once again, they gonna sock soul to R. Kelly. They gonna run his time up.
R. Kelly's defense attorney moved for a mistrial this afternoon, but a judge denied that request. Now, closing arguments just wrapped up minutes ago for today, but this will spill into tomorrow. A federal prosecutor told jurors the hidden side of R. Kelly has come to light. During closing arguments, Assistant U.S. Attorney Elizabeth Pizzolo urged them to find the Chicago-born R&B singer guilty. R. Kelly faces 13 counts of federal child pornography and obstruction of justice charges. The prosecution reminded jurors of their strongest evidence against the 55-year-old, multiple videos they say shows R. Kelly abusing his 14-year-old goddaughter. They focused on this woman known to jurors as Jane, who told them Kelly sexually abused her hundreds of times. Pizzolo said Kelly, quote, took advantage of his fame over his position of power of Jane and her family and performed degrading acts on her for his own sick pleasure. The prosecution accused Kelly's co-defendants and former associates Darrell McDavid and Milton Brown of covering up Kelly's sexual abuse. Is Kelly the only one that's going to deal with this? Absolutely not. He's going to rely on his team. The purpose of this conspiracy was to conceal the tapes of Jane, to keep the tapes of Jane from ever coming to light. McDavid's defense attorney argued the prosecution's case is riddled with reasonable doubt. Bo Brindley said prosecutors had to prove McDavid actually knew R. Kelly was having sex with minors. He said, quote, every piece of evidence builds, one upon the next, to the ultimate truth that the man didn't know. Brown's defense attorney agreed. He spent 45 minutes poking holes in the prosecution's case, saying it cannot be trusted. Now, one of the jurors said she simply could not listen to the case anymore. She said she thought she was having a panic attack and asked the judge to be removed. The judge granted that request, and now an alternate juror will likely step in. Tomorrow, R. Kelly's defense attorney is on tap, so she's expected to start at 9 a.m. with her closing arguments.
And I'm going to tell y'all something else. That juror that had that panic attack today was not a good look. That lady heard and saw so much disgusting and disturbing stuff. Her heart couldn't even take no more.
After 4 weeks of testimony, we heard closing arguments today in the federal case against R. Kelly. The government up first calling the R&B superstar a sexual predator.
This afternoon, we also heard from the defense, including closing arguments from attorneys for Kelly's former business manager and staffer.
Kelly's former business manager was on the stand for 3 days last week. Today, we're hearing closing statements in his defense. That defense drilling into and questioning testimony we heard from 2 witnesses in this trial. Witnesses who placed him in situations he denied being a part of. The jury in this case has heard 4 weeks of testimony from more than 30 witnesses and seen 4 weeks of evidence, including clips from 3 sex tapes. Closing arguments detailed charges pending in this child pornography and obstruction of justice case, with 13 against R. Kelly, 4 against former business manager Darrell McDavid, and 1 against former staffer Milton June Brown. We heard the least about Brown throughout the trial, something his defense focused on right off the bat in closings. His defense detailing promises the prosecution made regarding evidence they claimed would show Brown was guilty, but insisted the only thing the government showed throughout the trial was proof Brown was doing his job, the same way many others working for Kelly at that time were doing theirs. Darrell McDavid's lawyers' closing arguments had a theme we've heard throughout this trial. How McDavid only ever acted through the request of the nationally acclaimed lawyers and investigators he hired to be Kelly's team. People who McDavid's defense say never would have risked their careers and reputations to cover up child porn, committing crimes themselves. Those men, entertainment attorney Jerry Margolis, private investigator Jack Palladino, and criminal defense attorney Ed Jensen. All of those men have died. Prosecutors pointed out earlier in the trial, McDavid is the only one alive who can testify to the details and incidents he had. Wrapping up by saying the government promised clear proof and, quote, they didn't give you what they promised. Use your verdict. In the prosecution's closing today, we told you about at 5, they said all 3 of those men knew about Kelly's behavior and tried to cover it up. We'll hear from his defense first thing tomorrow morning.
One of R. Kelly's co-defendants testified for a second day.
Former business manager Daryl McDavid said that he feels embarrassed for believing Kelly's previous denials of sexual impropriety with underage girls. McDavid said he learned a lot of things during the trial he was previously unaware of. He stopped short of saying he believed Kelly was guilty in the case. McDavid, along with Kelly and another man, are charged with producing and receiving child pornography. He also faces a charge of obstruction of justice related to Kelly's 2008 trial in Cook County when he was acquitted of child porn charges. Kelly was convicted last year of racketeering and sex trafficking in a courtroom in New York. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison on those charges.
Jim DeRogatis has been reporting on R. Kelly for more than 20 years. He's also the author of the book Solace, The Case Against R. Kelly, and he joins us live on Zoom this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Larry, Robin.
What do you make of McDavid's testimony?
Well, that declaration that he was embarrassed and he learned a lot of things only at this trial came in the last couple of minutes, literally, of direct examination that lasted 10 hours. Before that, he was completely unaware of Kelly abusing minors. He believed him innocent all through the 2008 trial, although he was paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to people for videotapes. He believed those were either fake or did not show Kelly abusing minors. It stretches credulity. Today, the prosecutors have their chance at cross-examination. All of my colleagues who have been covering this trial are expecting it to be brutal, is the word I think the Tribune used this morning. His first manager, the man who brought Kelly from literally singing at backyard barbecues to selling hundreds of millions of records, Barry Hankerson, Aaliyah's uncle, resigned as Kelly's manager, ceding that role to McDavid in 2000. And he was on the record with letter and emails to Kelly's attorneys and the head of Jive Records saying, this man has a problem, a compulsion to pursue underage girls, and I can no longer abide working with him. He needs help. That's, I think, one of the most concrete pieces of evidence. There are many others that McDavid, one would think, would have been aware of.
Our Kelly attorney Steve Greenberg was with us earlier in the week, and he stated that, a lot of these testimony of girls are being called into question because they've changed their story over the years. What do you think the impact of that will be on the jury?
Robin, I think having seen the video and heard some very credible testimony from 4 victims at this trial, let's step back. There were 22 victims in the Brooklyn trial for which Kelly is sentenced to 30 years. There were 4 victims in this trial. There have been a dozen civil lawsuits. There are many other videos in addition to the ones shown in court. This accumulation of evidence, all these women cannot be lying. And when events are 20, 25 years ago, memory clouds and conflicts are told. And yes, the prosecution could have been a bit more thorough in pointing out some discrepancies in testimony versus lawsuits or other things. But at the end of the day, everybody knew this man. Everybody in Chicago. Go to the South or West sides and ask people. This was never a secret from the early 90s on.
Jim, real quick, last you were on, our viewers heard that you were going to be called to testify. What happened? to that?
The judge ruled that the questions Bonjean, Kelly's defense attorney, and McDavid's two defense attorneys wanted to ask me, I had already written about and put in the public record many times. He saw no relevance, and it was a win for the First Amendment, Larry, because every time a journalist is compelled to take the stand and talk about their work, is chipping away at the reporter's privilege and putting a damper on others who would tell complicated stories like this, whether it's me, you, Sam Charles in your shop, who's done extraordinary work, any of us.
The trial's first week focused on another Kelly accuser, Jane, who identified herself as the girl being sexually abused by Kelly in 3 separate videos from the 1990s. One of those videos became the subject of Kelly's 2008 Cook County trial, during which he was acquitted of child pornography charges, because prosecutors now allege Kelly and his associates went to great lengths to keep Jane quiet and recover other incriminating footage. Witnesses last week largely focused on those efforts. 3 people testified that Kelly's team paid them to bring him videos of his homemade child pornography while he was awaiting his Cook County trial.